Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the third session of the training program on evaluation design, methods and approaches organized by SLEvA and Center for Evaluation in collaboration with UNICEF. And today is our third session, and we're going to discuss more on the evaluability concept. And so thank you so much for giving your time to join this session. And I am Rajini Kaesta, and I will be moderating the session. And the ground rules, as usual, please keep your mic in mute so that we wouldn't disturb. And also, we highly encourage all of you to put your comments, your questions, and your reflection in the chat box, and we will address them during our Q&A session. And if you have any queries or concern, please do not hesitate to get in touch with us, and especially through Madhuka, who's in touch with you all. And so here we are in the third session, and so I was actually reflecting on this how our lives have changed. We have all our meetings, our training seminar, all of these are being done virtually, and I really miss that interpersonal chemistry, that synergy, that energy that comes, that develops while we do face-to-face meetings. And now this is just lost in virtual meeting. So today I was thinking we'll do something different to break this barrier to some extent. I invite you to all open the video, and so we can just open our video, all of us, and say hi to each other, and probably greet each other, wave, or do namaste, or I invite all of you to open your video, please. And I'm sure you know each other already. And yeah, I can see our participants putting on their video. It's nice to see all of you. And yes. Okay, hi everyone. Okay, so how about others? Okay. Okay, Chamatkara, I got to see you now, even if we were talking to each other for quite some time. And yes.
Okay. It's actually, Rajni, very strange because I can only see the first page of participants with the video. And then
so what you'll have to do is there's an arrow towards the right side of the screen. So you can see the other part of the remaining part of the
okay, I can see. Yeah. Yes, but they haven't opened their cameras.
Yeah, so greetings to all of you, and very nice to see you all. And I can already see the smiling faces, and thank you for this positive and vibrant energy that you've shared with all of us. And yes, I see, I mean, few of you probably not so comfortable opening your video. That's fine. Okay, hello everyone. Okay, so now we'll go on to, so we have designed a small poll for all of you. And there are very few questions that you will have to answer. And these questions in the poll are based on our previous session. And also we hope that the responses that you give will also help us. So I'll just share my screen.
Rajni, you're on mute.
Yes, I actually kept it in mute because I was talking to my husband saying, take away my son. Okay, so here we are. We've already done this in our first session. Please log into menti.com and you will see the code on the top of the screen. It's so you can use the regular browser that you use in your laptop or your computer, but for better experience, I invite you to use your mobile phone. Go to the browser, type menti.com, and then use this code. The code is 7630869. Could you please get into Menti and use this code and get here? Okay, we'll just give you, yeah, I already see the response. So I see that 4 of you are already here in the Menti page. Yes. So for those who have not used it, you can either open a browser like your, Google Chrome or Internet Explorer and just type menti.com and use the code 763086, or use the phone. Yes, I already see participants getting in, and I see that you are ready, you're excited. So, okay, I think we should. I see a chat box here, and okay, if you're not able to log in here, please give your answers in the chat box. Yeah, if you're not able to go to Menti and you're not able to access this poll, we'll be happy to have your responses in the chat box. Okay, here we are. Okay, so now I'll move on to the questions. Just a minute. Why this is not moving ahead? Sometimes Menti can be a little funny also. Okay, here's the question. So what adjectives or attributes can you think for what is required for evaluation functions to be independent? So it's, you please answer this question. Anything that comes to your mind when you think about the independence of the evaluation function, what does it come to your mind? Great, the answers are coming in. Credible, impartial, funding, of course, unbiased. Okay, regulations, yes. Rose, please feel free to jump in if you have any comments or input on this, okay? And
Sure.
wow.
No, this is very good. It's fantastic.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
just for the participants, so the nice thing about using the word cloud on the Menti is that we'll take the final output from here, and we can attach it to the course material for everyone. So I think it'll be a good souvenir but all the elements that are coming are excellent. Yeah. So this is also just to say that the why we have this warm-up polling here is to connect the sessions also together. And last week we had an excellent session on the evaluation function and the M&E practices in Sri Lanka. So you will see the next questions. This is all kind of soliciting some of the thinking that hopefully was triggered by the presentations and last week. But this is excellent.
Yeah.
This is
wow. Rose, if you've seen, there very nice points are coming in. For example, sustainability, and yeah, accountability, third-party involvement, freedom. Okay.
Yeah. I wonder if
that's true.
There's one very, very important word, which is the transparency. I think it says, it might be that it's quickly written as, where did it disappear? Transparency, but I think it means transparency. That's very important also, as you know, to have the transparency for the results and sharing those results also with the yeah, in the case of government, for instance, with the taxpayers.
And Rose, I also like this point where our participant is talking about the sufficient data, you know, so that the data that comes in actually is able to give the real result that, you know, so I like that. Yeah, and attitude. Wow, I would like to know more about it.
I think that's also related, yes, to the culture that we've been talking about. The other thing important about this, I think, was that we did ask people to input on the chat box, and hopefully we have Maduka or other colleagues who are taking the inputs from the chat box and typing them into Menti, because as said, Menti is great, but for some reason it often gets frozen and you might not be able to enter. But I think this is excellent. We'll harvest these, and I think Rajni, you can move on to the next question.
And okay, so here's the other question. What are the benefits of well-institutionalized evaluation function and culture for a country? What comes to your mind, you know, when we talk about what are the benefits you think if the country has the institutionalized evaluation function and culture? Please feel free to. Okay, so this need not be in one word. You can also make it very short statement also, that's fine. Okay. That's wonderful. Yes. Okay, so sustainability, sustainable development, good governance, cost effectiveness. Okay, somebody has used the annotation, leadership support. Okay, learning from lessons. Yeah, learning, very important. Achieving the real impact, important for efficient and effective goods or service delivery. Wonderful, value for work. Result-based planning. Okay, lesson learned. Can learn from finding good as well as bad. Yes, learning is highlighted there. So
good governance. Yeah, there was good governance, the very pillar of democratic, well-run governments in a way. That's very important. These are great.
Accountable development.
Yeah, and learning from past experience for better results to make better lives for people. That's actually great. And in the past, I worked for an agency that was very keen on you know, learning from failure, because that's also a very fundamental part of the evaluation culture. We often we're very worried about presenting findings on failures, but those are actually often more important for becoming better at programming and at delivering results, because when we are open and transparent about what didn't work, then we can try to not to make the same mistakes again. But of course, it's often because there are other elements related. So we're not so good, and maybe it's also human nature. We're not so good at kind of transparently communicating failures, of course. These are all excellent.
Yeah, excellent point. And I like this particularly gender inclusion is mentioned here, capacity building. Wonderful points that are coming in.
Can you see, Rajni, how many people we have logged in on the Menti?
I think so now the responses that we have received are from 31.
Okay, that's excellent. Yeah. So it means that if we minus the organizing parts, I think everyone has
everyone. Yes.
That's excellent. Thank you, everyone. This is very
Yeah, keeping the time in mind, I'll go to other question. We have another question as well, and so answers are still coming in, and it's not letting me go to the other. Okay, here's the third question for you. So, what are the challenges that you see in Sri Lanka if you want to institutionalize the evaluation culture? What are the challenges that are already there, and you know more better than we do, and we would love to hear from your experiences. So, okay, okay. There is no enforcing act, lack of awareness. Okay, the professional evaluators, lesson numbers, political interference, lack of evaluation culture, limited funding, lack of expertise in evaluation. Okay, inadequate capacity is highlighted in many places. Poor funding for evaluation. Funding is also another important issue that is being given here. And political commitment, also less local practitioners at the grassroots level. Corruption, okay. Lack of opportunities for young evaluators.
And now the top line analysis here is to see in the end where the opportunities and benefits, where they're coming in more quickly, and were there more of those than the challenges. Mm-hmm. We'll be able to solicit both views. That's going to be very interesting.
There is one, the point that I like. Monitoring is expected more than evaluation. High importance given to regular routine monitoring than the evaluation. And the other day we were talking about, when we say when we have a staff whose responsibility is M&E, we tend to give more priority to monitoring part, whereas the evaluation is overshadowed. So these were the issues that yeah we spoke in the last discussions. Evaluation is not embedded in the system. Financial constraints, good government policies to evaluation. Okay, so very good points are coming in, Rose. And yeah, so I basically see that our colleagues here are highlighting the capacity, highlighting the funding, the inadequate funding, institutional commitment, lack of institutional commitment especially from the and also political commitment is not there. So these are the major points that I see over here.
Great. I think we can probably move on. So we will document all these responses. We have 40 respondents, so we believe everyone has contributed. So this is all. We're going to share these with the other materials. So that's great.
Mm-hmm. So thank you so much for all your responses. And to continue this, Rose, you are most welcome to continue this session.
Great, thank you. Let me share my screen. So we'll go to today's topic, which was on.
So all of you know that Rose is working in UNICEF Regional Office for South Asia, and she's the multi-country evaluation specialist.
I think we have met, hopefully, most of the participants on the previous sessions. So let me share my screen. I believe that in today's program we had the warm-ups on bridging with the previous sessions, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the evaluability as also segue to then the forthcoming sessions and the face-to-face training, where we'll then deep dive into some of the methods and design issues. But I think at the after my presentation, we also have Arcela, who will present the assignments that that are going. So we'll try to leave adequately time for some discussion, and also for Arcela to present the assignments. So with no further ado, let me share my screen, and we can start. Is my screen visible?
Yes, yes, Rose.
Perfect. Right. And is the audio working?
Perfectly.
Great. Great. Okay. So about evaluability, the reason why we put the evaluability here is because it's oftentimes it's one of the sort of first steps into evaluation. And evaluability in itself, I think, is not new. Many of you probably have bumped into the term before, and it also has other terms in different organizational contexts. I think we used to call evaluability assessments scoping studies in the past, and I think now UNICEF has kind of institutionalized evaluability assessments as something that we do in the same context. In some organizations, it's not exactly the same, but they also talk about appraisals of the designs and so forth. So just to say that evaluability does have other terms, and sometimes they are quite close to each other. Just generically, when we talk about the evaluability assessments, then we talk about systematic approaches to deciding whether your program is evaluable or project is evaluable, and when and how to carry out the evaluation. Some of the dimensions that we usually kind of attribute to evaluability relates to evaluability in principle, and this is very much related to the conceptual sort of underpinnings and the design of the intervention, which is often kind of depicted in the theory of change, and how that theory of change has then been translated into the results framework of the program or the intervention. So that's very much a kind of more an in-principle discussion on the theory of change, and how that theory of change has then been translated into the results framework, and it has a lot to do with the kind of testing the logic and the causal change in principle. Evaluability in practice is then looking at how the theory has been operationally translated into practice, and you know, given the availability of relevant data and the capacity of management systems to provide it. So in practice, it looks at the operational elements of it, and I would say that in reality, most of the evaluability assessments are a little bit mix of both of these. So the one thing that should be here as well is really, it just doesn't have a kind of a neat term similar to the evaluability in principle, and evaluability in practice is something when we conduct an evaluability assessment for the purpose of the utility and practicality. So this is very much, this kind of evaluability assessment is very much focusing on the actual eventual evaluation. So when we talk about these kind of utility focused evaluability assessments, they're really looking at more in detail what the actual evaluation would look like in terms of the design, the scope, the approach, and potentially the methodology or methods of the evaluation. And this is also very useful to remember when there is a very expensive, like or there's a big investment in the evaluation, because then the kind of preparatory work for the evaluation should be quite solid. Some of the key questions for evaluability assessments could be how solid is the theory of change for the program, and here important to remember that we nowadays, we often take it for granted that there is a theory of change, but not all programs or policies or projects even have a theory of change. They might have a log frame or a different way of kind of narrating the change vision, but not as such a theory of change. And in those cases, even if it's an evaluability assessment or if it's an evaluation, oftentimes we then ask the evaluators to reconstruct the theory of change for the program. And it's important because we need the theory of change to understand the kind of what were the intended causal pathways of the project, outputs, outcomes, and overall sort of results. The results framework is still, when we do evaluability assessments, it's very often focused in looking at the results framework. And on the same context, we then look at the baselines, the targets, we look at the indicators, and it's kind of a health check for the results framework. And it's actually surprising how often we still find that when the program or the project is being designed, then we put indicative like baselines, but it's oftentimes it's to be determined later. And then when we go with an evaluability assessment on the second or the third implementation year, there still isn't a baseline, because baselines are actually very expensive to establish. But if without the baselines, then it's going to be very difficult to carry out the evaluation later on, because you won't be able to do the pre-post comparison. And as many of you know, doing a proper representative baseline is incredibly expensive. So some of the key elements of an evaluability assessment usually, but it might not focus on the results framework entirely, but would be like checking the baselines, whether those have been established, are the targets clearly defined, and are the indicators smart. And the strategies to obtain these targets, have they been formulated, and are they're clear? Then there's the adequate human financial resources. And then lastly, this is related to the utility sort of dimension of the evaluability assessment. What are the most appropriate approaches to the eventual evaluation of the program? So if it's a large program, then the evaluability assessment most likely would be asked to actually give the outlines on what the evaluation should look like in the end. And also here, good to remember that it's not only the appropriate approaches to the eventual evaluation, but also the appropriate timing, because oftentimes we also we expect that the evaluation will happen at the end of the program or the project or the programming period, but in fact more and more we focus on evaluations that are not summative in nature, so they can be rolled out earlier, and that can then ease the learning elements of the evaluation. So the approaches and the timing would be some of the key outputs from an evaluability assessment. So then just a quick thing, because on the SMART goals and SMART indicators, I put this here because I still use these cheat sheets on the SMART indicators very often when I either develop indicator results frameworks with indicators, or when I have to review them, or when I have to evaluate them. So I often have the kind of the SMART sort of sheet somewhere close by, so that I remember to also analyze the indicators and the targets from this perspective. So just a recommendation to all the colleagues to remember that there are these quick and simple sheets that we can use in the M&E practice. So then, when to conduct an evaluability assessment? This is also a big discussion with evaluators and organizations, and there's no right answer to this. So I've screen grabbed this from the betterevaluation.org. They have an excellent site which has everything you need on evaluations, and they also have good sort of resources on evaluability assessments. And this one I took just because it highlights that we can do evaluability assessments at any point of the programming or project cycle. It's just that the use for the evaluability assessment will obviously be a little bit different. So we can do the evaluability assessment at the design stage, which then focuses on very much on the change theory and the other theory of change. And this is what we mentioned earlier. This is then very close to the kind of the appraisal approach in the past. We can also do evaluability assessment at inception, which looks also at the theory of change, but also data availability, and then feeds into improving the M&E framework or the results framework. Nope. There's a little bit of background. And we also do evaluability assessments during the implementation, actually at any stage of implementation. And I would say that the evaluability assessments that I've been managing or involved in, they've been usually in the implementation stage at different points. But just to say that towards the end of the programming cycle, of course, then the utility aspect of the evaluability assessment vis-a-vis the type of evaluation that would be conducted increases. So some of the outputs from those evaluability assessments that are done towards the end of the programming cycle, they really are already deliberating on delivering the terms of reference for the actual evaluation. So let's move on. So a couple of points on how can a good evaluability assessment improve your programming. And I put this good here because, well, hopefully all the work is good, but there's also a lot of discussion on evaluability assessments. They should still be very practical and they should be quite light. But at least at UNICEF, what we've noted is that these evaluability assessments, they're really great for triggering discussion and kind of capacitating and engaging program staff in the discussion on the theory of change. What are the causal pathways and the intended results, and in a more holistic manner. So sometimes we have, especially in larger programs, when we have like we're doing cross and multi-sectoral programming, everyone's very focused on their programming area. So understanding the whole kind of, you know, vision and mission and what we're trying to change. And here, of course, it easily comes to mind like the Sustainable Development Goals. It's good to have a bigger picture on the programming goals and targets. But the first thing, enable early adjustment and corrections to the design in order to better reach targets. This is when it's done at the very beginning. Strengthen the program's monitoring system to track program performance and demonstrate results. Provide an indication of the readiness to be evaluated. And this is something that we actually do even a traffic light sort of coding. So we might have different programming sections or elements that we have been kind of assessing with the evaluability assessment, and we give them yellow, green, yellow, or red light in terms of like whether it's ready to be evaluated, and that could be because of lack of data available or lack of any proxy measures to demonstrate results, or lack of a monitoring system that was intended to be put in place, but it was never there. There could be many reasons. And then the last point, providing inputs to a more relevant and timely evaluation, which increases cost effectiveness and utilization. I think the words that we would want to highlight here is really relevance and timely, and then also cost effectiveness and utilization. Would it be possible to ask for the participants to mute their microphones? Thank you very much. Wonderful. The relevance in terms of you know, having conducted an evaluability assessment which includes the stakeholders, it is likely to make the focus of the evaluation more relevant. So sometimes the evaluability assessment can recommend that this area is definitely an area which requires more evaluative focus, or then they can also say that this area here is covered well, and it's you know, doesn't necessarily need to be evaluated. And timely in the sense that the evaluability assessment can suggest the timing for the evaluation, like I said earlier, which might be at the end, or it might be midway, or it might be a process evaluation or an implementation evaluation, implementation fidelity evaluation, which would then already provide some learnings throughout the programming periods. Cost effectiveness, I think, is also important, because the better the evaluation is designed and informed, for instance, by stakeholders and an evaluability assessment, then you can focus the meager evaluation resources in evaluating what really needs to be evaluated. And all of this leads hopefully to a higher utilization rate for the evaluation. So I think this is all. I've tried to be quite short and leave time for any discussions. We've and I'd be happy to also answer to any questions on evaluability. We didn't check, because we had the other warm-up activities, we didn't check how many of the participants have been involved in evaluability assessments, how familiar this is to the participants. So it would be very interesting to hear if the participants have conducted these, and what the scope of these evaluability assessments have been. But before we move into the questions and answer sessions, we did share the evaluability checklist. I don't think we need to necessarily go through that checklist right now. I think it would be useful for you when we move on in terms of the content of the training course, and with the practical sessions, you will be able to use the evaluability checklist to check the health of the program, and the evaluability and the evaluation maturity of the program that would be evaluated. So on my part, I think we could maybe open for some questions, or then we could ask Acela if we want to first introduce the assignment, or would we leave that later?
Anyway, I don't see any questions over here, and I really encourage all our colleagues to put in your questions in the chat box, or if you want to speak out, please raise the hand and we will unmute you. And okay,
yeah,
there's a question.
Yeah, I see there's a very good question, and that should have been also covered. The question was, which team is doing evaluability assessment? So this is a very good question. I didn't actually put it there because I guess there's different ways of doing it. You could have an independent evaluator do the evaluability assessment, which would enhance the externality and the independence of the assignment. But there are also evaluability assessments which are done as a more internal process, which then engages more the program sections, and it's really evaluability assessment. I guess it depends a little bit on the organizations, but in some organizations they could be considered as an evaluation, but in some they're more kind of programming, informing, sort of preparatory exercises. So again, like I said, it doesn't have the same necessarily attributes as evaluation. So I think it depends on what is the utility, end of the evaluability assessment. That's a very good question, and I think there are different ways of carrying out the evaluability assessments.
Yeah, and our participants have also received that checklist. If you have a question on that also, please feel free to ask. And so there is one question here from Sanka. So the question is, what are the most effective ways to assess behavioral changes when evaluating peace building projects? Asela, please feel free to come in if you want to answer any of these questions.
Yeah, that's a very difficult question because evaluating behavior change is I think it's always very challenging, whether it's peace building context or any other context, because behavior change is a long-term process, and it's also something that changes. It regresses quite quickly when the situation changes. So the sustainability of behavior change has been one of the most challenging issues for the evaluation practice to measure. I mean, Asela or others, if you have any further thoughts on this, please share.
Yeah, no, I also invite the participant to put in your thoughts for this question or any question if you want to answer any of the questions. And I see our colleague Nalaka raised his hand. Can you
Yes,
please? Yeah.
yes. Hello, I am Nalaka Vehella. So, my question is, you mentioned that evaluability assessment is some kind of an evaluation or some kind of key questions. There are key questions you had mentioned that it is about having an TOC, means theory of change and other things. So, is it the only thing we are looking for in the evaluability assessment? What are the other criteria we are looking in an evaluability assessment, right? It means that if we have a good theory of change and result framework, it is possible. So that what are the other key factors we have to looking for evaluability assessment in the evaluability assessment? My question is
Yeah,
that.
so that's a good question. Yeah, I think the theory of change is one of the things that you would look at. But like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'd have to look at the theory of change. It's maybe because we use the theory of change or the change theory as a basis of developing the evaluation framework. So when we look at like which outputs leads to which outcomes and which outcomes leads to the intended results. So we look at the kind of the horizontal and the vertical logic. That's why the theory of change is good to be there so that we understand what was the intended what was the intended outcomes of the program and the strategies implemented for reaching those. But the other areas that an evaluability assessment can also be the results framework, but they can also look at like the funding. They can look at the human resources, the human and financial resources that have been allocated to reach those results, whether those are realistic and whether they have materialized. It can look at the capacity of the programming staff to deliver what was intended. So there's many things that an evaluability assessment can look at. But the bottom line is that it is really looking at the evaluation readiness of the program. So that's why there's a strong focus often on the results frameworks. For instance, when we talked about the baselines, if the baselines have not been set, then we know that we cannot evaluate the pre-post from the pre-post angle. We'll have to have a different angle for that. The other element, I think somebody noted it here on the feasibility studies, is that very often when we have terms of references, we're asking for the evaluators, for instance, to carry out cost-benefit analysis. And then when it comes time to the evaluators to do the cost-benefit analysis, it is often discovered that, well, there's no unit costs. There's no such data doesn't exist. The program or they never generated unit cost. So there is actually no way that the evaluation can can conduct a cost-benefit analysis, which is a fairly complex tool, but it's very often in there. So evaluability assessments are basically checking on these kind of elements as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you.
Thank
So
you.
we have, I mean, we can see from Nalaka that it would be nice if you, Rose, if you have other resources on evaluability assessment, please do share with all of us. And I see Subhashini here, and would you like to open your mic and put forward your opinion? I mean, I see your statement there. Subhashini, do you want to come in?
Yeah, yeah. I think the team who is going to, the party who is going to do the evaluability assessment can be decided based on the budget availability. Am I correct, Rose?
Yes, I mean, obviously this is subject to some budget allocation for the evaluability assessment. So we often have it that in the context where, because not everyone is like said, there are different terms for doing that kind of scoping and evaluability, but we often have, when we work with other partners, it might be in the program design that, you know, there will be a kind of mandatory evaluability assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And especially with larger programs, that's often the case, that that either our donors or our partners or UNICEF would you know, ask for the evaluability assessment to ensure that the evaluation, which is a big investment, is you know, focusing on the right elements and is designed early enough in the programming that it really like increases the utility and the kind of relevance of the evaluation. So yes, but this is also a question where I don't think there's one single answer in terms of the where the budget comes, but yeah, it would be usually earmarked and already asked. But sometimes it comes as a need from the programming. So perhaps there's like some discussion that not all the elements of the programming are clear, and the results framework is not clear, and then there's an ask for an actually like an evaluability kind of review of the program framework.
Thanks, Rose. And I'm just curious to know, has any one of our participants, have you been part of any evaluability assessment or scoping exercise? If you have, then we'd be happy to listen to your experience. And what were the key components that you, okay, I think
Rajni, meanwhile, I just want to mention about this question regarding the peace building project evaluation. I think this is the second time it came. As I remember correctly, it came last time as well when Mr. Sivanyana Soti presented about evaluation practices. I can see Mr. Sivanyana Soti is there. I'm wondering whether he can do a quick intervention, because there was a project in Sri Lanka, and under his ministry also there was some interventions regarding evaluation of peace building programs, and also his ministry was involved in developing some tools including barometer. So if there is any opportunity, I guess few minutes intervention by Mr. Sivanyana Soti regarding that, because it came second time, this question, last webinar and this webinar too.
Yes, I see him here. Could you please open your mic, and if you want to give your response, we'll be happy to listen to you.
Maybe if Mr. Sivanyana Soti will be back in a few minutes, then I can meanwhile answer to one of the questions, which on the chat box on the percentage of project cost should be allocated to evaluation. So I think this relates back to, I think it was the very first session we had when we were talking about the lack of earmarked funds for evaluations, and at that point in time we discussed, I mean, in UNICEF, the practice is that the evaluation policy stipulates that 1% of the program expenditure should be allocated to evaluation. So that's the minimum sort of percentage of the program spends to evaluation. But otherwise, I don't know what the Sri Lanka evaluation policy, if it has such sort of stipulations or recommendations. I think the Sri Lanka colleagues would better be placed to answer to that. But it's true that there should be some kind of recommendation, at least, on what would be the evaluation spent vis-a-vis the program expenditure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks, Rose. Regarding the Sri Lanka evaluation policy, actually, there's no specific, as I remember, specifically mentioned about this, what percentage should go for evaluations out of, projects or programs. But in the draft National Evaluation Bill, as I remember, it says 1% of the program's projects, which is not passed yet. But there were a lot of discussions about that. Which what percentage of the program budget or project budget should allocate for evaluations, and it is 1%, as mentioned in the draft bill.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Okay, carrying on with this Q&A. I see Amila here, and would you like to open your mic and put forward your thoughts and your opinions here? Because it would be nice to hear you. Amila, would you like to come in?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
I mean, sometimes in some projects, theory of change also will change when projects are progressing. Then can we modify the theory of change after implementing or something? I mean, can we modify the theory of change after implementing?
After the implementation of
projects.
Okay.
Yes, that's also a very good question, which we then often bump into, because I guess the original thinking on the theory of change should be kind of solid, in a sense that there are certain strategies that lead to certain expected outcomes, and then those outcomes should logically lead to certain change. But the problem with the theory of change, as you probably all know, is that people have sometimes different way of kind of just seeing what comes first. And I think somebody is mentioning there that the TOC is based on a root cause analysis. That's very true. There's usually the problem trees that are prepared for the issues, and then the DOC has assumptions and risks and the strategies. But I don't see it is not a fixed sort of. To me, it's more living, and if there are changes in the assumptions or the risks, then it can be a sort of living sort of tree as well. Mm-hmm. But it's more often when we do these revisions, it's to see that it is coherent, the results framework and the theory of change, and then we might do some adjustments, but to be honest, they're usually at the kind of the output level then. So for instance, when there's a program design, we don't often we don't often change the higher level outcomes, but we work on the lower level sort of outputs and activities to specify and focus those.
Mm-hmm. And just asking on this, adding on to this question, Rose, for example, now let's say the context has changed, like with the COVID. So perhaps the context would also matter a lot, right? And probably that would give the opportunity to do a bit of adjustment there as well, because the need could be changed, right?
Absolutely, and that's what's happening a lot right now. But it's really, it's adjusting a lot of programming to the COVID context.
Mm-hmm.
But you would still have the overall objectives.
Mm-hmm.
The change, the vision would be still
Mm-hmm.
the same. Those higher level goals, and if you think
Mm-hmm.
already at the national sort of development plan level,
Mm-hmm.
those would still be the same. But it would be
Mm-hmm.
the potentially the activities and the assumptions and risks that would change around the theory of change.
Okay, thank you, Rose. So just looking at the time, I would just ask one last question to you, and this is again on the criteria of, what are the specific criteria to develop the evaluability assessment. So I think more of the questions on the criteria has come up. Do you want to respond on that? And I also would request you to share the resources on this, because I see that the participants are very interested to learn more about it.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I request Asela to get ready for your part.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think we can definitely share. There's a lot of resources on evaluability and evaluability assessments, and while I don't think there is specific criteria to develop an evaluability assessment, I think there's a lot of guidance to develop evaluability assessment. But like I said, it then depends on what is what sort of purpose is the evaluability assessment developed. So like in the beginning we talked about, it can be at the design or the inception or the implementation, and it can look at the evaluability in principle or in practice, or then looking at the actual the kind of practicality of having already the terms of reference for the evaluation as an output from the evaluability assessment. The other thing is there's a question on the evaluability assessment and an ex ante evaluation. Are they the same? If not, what's the difference? I think we consider evaluability assessment still a much lighter exercise. It's not drawing evaluative judgments on how the program has performed. It's really looking at the evaluation readiness of the program. So it's kind of more a health check. It's not necessarily evaluating, what has been done right or what has done wrong, or whether these results have been achieved or not. But it's more looking at whether with the framework that's been put in place, whether those results can be achieved and what's missing. And that's why the results framework is often quite important. But I think we'll share all the links for the resources around evaluability assessment. So there's lots of material out there and some the better evaluation is excellent. The UN has developed a lot of guidance. I think there's a lot of guidance from DFID also on the evaluability assessment. So we'll share those resources. Thank you, and over to you, Asela.
Thank you, and thank you, Rose. So I would, with the permission of all of you, I hope you will not mind if we extend our session by 10 minutes, right? Over to you, Asela.
Thank you very much, Rajni, and thank you very much, Rose, for the presentation and excellent Q&A session. I can see, a lot of, engagement and involvement by participants. That is really encouraging. I will try to be brief So this is the third webinar we have done already, and there is another webinar. But I can see that all three webinars were well taken, participation wise, and also involvement of participants in webinars, active participation, as well as asking questions and engaging with the discussion. So that is a very good sign. And as we mentioned that, so there are 4 webinars, and then after that 2 face-to-face training programs. So I think this is kind of preparation for the 2 face-to-face training. So next webinar, sorry, which is the 4th webinar, is on 13th of October at 6:30, same time, on introduction to SDGs and indicators. It's mainly about SDGs and also some information, some updates from Sri Lanka about implementation about SDGs and voluntary national reviews. So be ready for that, and mark your calendar for 13th for the 4th webinar, and also mark your calendar for the residential training programs. So we have 2 residential training programs followed by these webinars. The first one is about evaluation design. So it will be held on 26, 27 and 28 October at Avani Hotel in Kalutara. That is a residential training program. And the second residential training is on evaluation design and evaluation methods and approaches, which will be held on 17, 18 and 19 November. And I remember that in the first introductory webinar, I mentioned different dates for this first webinar because we wanted to have the first webinar on 17th, 18th and 19th, and the second in December, but we have advanced that for your benefits, of course. And also we want to have webinars when the situation is better for us to have this residential training program. So we have advanced these 2 trainings a bit. And Madhuka will come back to you with information about details about the training programs. You have received today a mail regarding this mark the calendar information, mark the calendar mail with these dates. We want 2 things from you. One is that confirm your availability for the 2 training programs. That is one. Secondly, confirm that you are able to attend both training programs, because you should be able to attend both training programs. Otherwise you should not attend, because attending one training would not be the best, because we have a big demand for the face-to-face training. So good to give an opportunity for someone who can attend both training programs. So that is our request. So please confirm your these 2 things by email. I saw few responses, but just say I will attend the workshop, but please be specific that you are available for these dates, and then you can attend, that your assurance that you can attend both training programs. And we are looking forward to that, these 2 training programs after the webinars. So regarding the assignment, so we have a very short assignment for you. Let me, Rajni, can you put it on the screen? You have it, right? It's a very
Madhuka, would you like to share? Because in my PowerPoint, there's no such slide.
Okay, it's not the slide, but let me also see whether I can present, right?
Does Asela have a, can he share his screen, Rajni?
He's putting it, okay.
Okay.
So there are it's coming. Or shall I? Madhuka, you put in the assignment?
Yes, I'll share.
Okay. So there are four very short, there are four questions actually in this assignment, and we need very brief, short answers. So I have mentioned, 100 words maximum. So we want very short answers, and also we have mentioned about, marks for this, because we are planning to mark each assignment. And please send it to the CFE email mentioned here by 10th of October. And yeah, please go a little down. The first question is, explain the difference between research and evaluation. Of course, in the first webinar, in introduction to evaluation presentation by Rose, this was, explained and very briefly mentioned, the difference between research and evaluation. And the second question is about explain what helped Sri Lanka to move from donor-led evaluations to country-led evaluations. If you participated in the second webinar, of course, Mrs. Sivanyana Soti mentioned about that, and specifically is, slides 7, 8, and those slides, explain this. And he also mentioned that, how it is important to have country-led evaluations rather than donor-led evaluations. And now, we are promoting country-led evaluations. And third question is, what are the key challenges you have faced related to evaluation in your work? So you may be, handling evaluation or monitoring and evaluation, but at the same time, you may face, some challenges in your, organization, workplace. Maybe, conducting evaluations or getting support from your leadership, or use of evaluations after conducting, or use of evaluation findings and recommendations, anything. But we want up to 3 challenges, that is enough, within 100 words. And fourth question is, how are you going to use the knowledge gained from the face-to-face training? I mentioned there are going to be 2 face-to-face training programs, workshops, one on evaluation design and the other one on evaluation methods and approaches. How are you going to use this knowledge you gain from these workshops to overcome these challenges? So, and also, how you are going to use this knowledge in your work. So that's the main part. You can explain, up to 3 key actions that, this is what you are going to do after the training programs, how you are going to apply this knowledge in your work. So these are the 4 questions, and take it easy, and, add very brief answers, maximum 100 words, and send to this email address mentioned here by 10th of October. So that's the assignment, because we want to, engage you more in this series and this process. That's why we are giving this assignment. I think it's clear, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Asela. And yes, you have a work to do, and but then learning event is not just about the session, but after the session, how much we put our effort and have a learning attitude, and you all have shown it really well. Thank you so much, and we will be looking forward to read your answers. And so, Asela, thank you so much for making it very clear, and also the dates, and also the dates and questions. Our coordinator Madhuka will be in touch with you, so do not worry about the questions. We will send it by email. And so, Rose, thank you so much for this wonderful session. And really, this evaluability assessment, evaluability in itself is such an important topic, because whenever we try to, think about evaluation, we straight away go on TOR, drafting TOR and all this stuff. But how important it is, to have this mindset that, it actually having this evaluability in mind in your plan is so much important. And as Rose said, there are instances where external consultant evaluators are doing this, but there are many cases where even the internal evaluators, from the organization, from the program themselves are doing it. And so it is definitely a wonderful exercise and wonderful concept that Rose shared with us. And thank you so much, Rose. And so here we are. I asked you for 10 minutes and it's 7:40. And so thank you for being a wonderful participants. Thank you for your involvement, your interactions. Every session we have also learned a lot for you, and also want to thank you for your feedback that you've been sending to us. Thank you so much. And here we end the session. Have a nice evening, everyone.
Thank you and good luck with the assignment, everyone.
I hope all of you score full marks.